Well, again, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Colette Holt, and I am your facilitator for this afternoon's introduction of the Central Management Services Disparity Study. So thank you for taking time out of your busy days to spend some time with us. A couple of housekeeping matters. We would appreciate if you would type your questions in the chat box. We have a lot of people signed up, and it's just impossible to manage that with this many people talking. So please do that. I apologize in advance. There's a fair amount of noise back here. It's kind of a construction site right now. So I'll talk loudly. And if people can't hear me, please just raise your hand or go into the chat or let us know that you're not able to hear us. So with that, I'm going to start screen sharing. So let's make sure we can get this going here. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's for tomorrow's event. Okay, here we go. There we go. Can everyone hopefully see us? Vicki, let me know if you can't. We'll go to the slideshow. But first of all, I also want to introduce Ariel Johnson, who heads the Department of the BEP program and Central Management Services and is our study manager. So thank you, Ariel, for being able to join us. There may be some questions at the end that I may not know the answer to, but we're delighted to have a representative and the head of the program with us today. You'll also see there on the screen a little CH, that's Victoria Farrell from our shop. She's hanging out to help me with technical assistance and with reading any of the questions so that we can manage kind of the flow of it a little bit. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started. So quickly, a bit about the Disparity Study team. We are a group of national experts that work exclusively on minority, women, small disadvantaged business programs and conduct disparity studies. I myself have been involved in these issues since back in 1990 when I was an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Chicago and was honored to write the very first ordinance for the city. I started my own firm in 1994, and we have been focused exclusively on these issues ever since. Also want to highlight Dr. Stephen Pitts, who is our economist. Stephen is certainly one of the foremost African-American economists of his generation. He recently retired as associate chair of the Labor Center at the University of California at Berkeley, and has been working with us on all of our studies, and will be involved in managing all of our quantitative data collection for this study. And then you see there the rest of our very competent and qualified team. And as I say, we've been working together for many years. Also want to introduce our wonderful subcontractors on this project. Many of you know Sandy Yano, who I believe is on. I think I saw Sandy's name go by. Sandy was the DBE director at Metra for over 30 years. Retired a while ago now, I suppose, and decided to start her own consulting firm focusing on issues related to MWBEs. She has worked with us on all of our Chicago area and state of Illinois studies, and so we're delighted again to have Sandy join us. Synergetic Solutions is also part of our team. It's a very experienced community outreach and engagement firm that also is well-versed in certification issues because they provide certification consulting. And like Sandy, they will be assisting us with anecdotal data collection and community outreach. Latasha Bender is also going to be working with us. Her firm provides market research, technical assistance, program management, those kinds of services. And she will be working with us on contract data collection. So let me turn to the elements of the study. For those of you that are reasonably familiar with disparity studies, this will be kind of old hat for you, but there may be some of you participating for whom this is new information. We will have a dedicated study website. I have the link at the end. You are certainly welcome to visit that at your leisure. We have information about the study, about our team, and importantly, how to participate and how to contact us about any questions you have, or leave comments, or get information about the interview process that we're going to engage in. A disparity study almost always has a legal chapter. It can be rather dense going, but we think it's important that a court understand what we think the law to be and how our disparity study methodology fits within it. Many of you probably know that these programs have been subject to now, frankly, decades of litigation, and the federal courts are increasingly hostile to any of these race-based contracting programs. So it's very important that we stay within the legal parameters that the federal courts have imposed upon us, and make sure that our study methodology will pass judicial muster. So turning now to the actual contract data that we're going to look at, that we're going to calculate CMS's utilization of minority women firms. We do it on dollars, so it's a percentage of all dollars that were spent with MWBEs during the study period of 2018 to 2021. Our first step is to gather all of the prime contracts to create an initial contract data file, and we are well on our way with CMS in getting those records for the prime contracts pulled. Our second step is to gather additional data to create a sample file. CMS just has too many contracts for us to be able to look at them all, and that's fine. The courts have accepted sampling as an acceptable way to provide a deep and broad picture of the agency's contracting record. So to create the sample file, we may be asking CMS for some additional information. Once we have our sample file to analyze, then our contract data team goes back to prime contractors to collect missing subcontractor data. Agencies, by and large, do not collect all of the records that you need for a disparity study because they don't really have any need for them in their day-to-day operations. But it is critical that we are able to gather and analyze the information for all subcontractors that worked on state contracts, not just BEP or certified subs. We aim to collect at least 80% of the contract dollars. We are usually well above that. We recently completed a study for the Texas Department of Transportation, and I think we were about 94% there. So we have a very diligent group of people who will basically just track you down until we get the information. We will assign any missing race and gender ownership status, because often that's not in the contract records, as well as assign a detailed 6-digit industry code. And not to be just speaking in acronyms, but NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification System. Those are designations that the Bureau of the Census has created to help to categorize what industries firms are in. The courts require us to use the most detailed available information, and this is a very detailed data source that we can use to assign industry codes. Once we've contacted all the primes and we have our complete information, then we can start to actually analyze the state's utilization. The federal courts limit a state government to its program reach for its own local market. For those of you that have any familiarity with this issue, one of the things that got the city of Richmond in trouble in the Richmond versus Croson case all those years ago was the fact that Richmond was accepting and certifying firms from anywhere. So the court said that no, a local government can only have a program that extends its geographic reach. So very important for us to be able to determine that. We also have to figure out what's the product market that the state operates in, and try to weight that by the importance of that spending. You know, it may spend the money in a lot of kind of ancillary codes, and we'll pick that up in the study. But it's important that our overall analysis look at the major codes that the state actually uses. So we'll determine the geographic market. We look at counties as our geographic unit of measurement. and we will look for where at least 75% of the dollars are spent on contiguous counties. We'll also determine that product market, and then we will analyze the firms that sell what the state purchases and that are located in the state's market to produce detailed utilization estimates broken out by race, by gender, and by 6-digit NAICS code. So that's the state's utilization of minorities and women. So now we want to turn to the availability. So utilization is who got the money, and availability is who might have. So the courts require us to take a look at the availability of ready, willing, and able firms to do business with the state, either as prime vendors or as some type of subcontractor. So you see there are the steps that we'll take to calculate that. We create a master directory of MBEs and WBEs from multiple entities. Obviously, CMS's BEP list, but there are many others. We'll also develop any information we can from the contract data files where, as I mentioned before, we'll be assigning race and sex and codes to any information that's missing. For our overall business universe, we look to Dun & Bradstreet. It's actually called Hoover's now because that's who bought them. And this is the most comprehensive and current source of overall information about businesses in the economy. And we like this data source for a couple of reasons. One is that federal judges like it. People use D&B data for all sorts of things. Business valuation cases, divorce, it has many, many uses. And so the federal courts understand that it's not collected for the purpose of a disparity study and therefore seen as being objective. We also like it because it is detailed. That's how Dun & Bradstreet makes money, is by finding this information and making sure that it's updated. So we think that's our best overall source of business universe information. They also do have an identifier for minority and women-owned firms. We have a special set of tabs that we buy from them to break that out further, but it is a good data source. To the extent that anything is missing, perhaps in the contract data file or anywhere else, we will then fill all of that in. And based on that, we can determine the detailed availability to the state. We will disaggregate that by race, by gender, and again, by industry codes. And we will provide it unweighted and weighted. And let me spend just a minute explaining what I mean by that. Excuse me. Unweighted availability is essentially a head count. Who's out there today? But it's important that we give the correct weight to the different industries in which the state spends money. You can get some very odd results if you decide that you're going to have the same weight for, let's say, catering as you're going to for IT. So this is very much accepted. The courts look to this approach of figuring out where, in fact, the state really spends its money so that we can give them estimates that are particularly useful. So that's our utilization analysis and our disparity analysis, availability analysis. And then we'll engage in disparity testing. Disparity testing can look kind of intimidating and scary. We have some equations in there, but it's really a very simple idea. And it is, how tight is the fit between who was used and who was available? And to the extent that you have a gap or a disparity there, that is evidence that the courts allow us to look to support the need to have some type of race and gender-based program. There are different tests to apply to that. There's what's called substantive disparity, which is where if you have a ratio that's 80% or lower, you can perhaps support the inference that the reason for that disparity is discrimination. Then there's also statistical significance, which is where you apply confidence intervals. How confident are you that your results are not from chance? So we'll apply all of these statistical techniques to provide the state with disparity ratios. And we will do that for all the groups combined and for the groups disaggregated with the industry groups combined. So that's the analysis of the state's own contracting information. But we also think it's important to look at what happens in the wider Illinois economy, where these types of contracting diversity programs are not widely practiced. This is especially important for an agency like the state that has had a program for many, many years, where I really don't expect to see a lot of large and significant disparities because of the interposition of the remedy of the program. So this has been very important to our ability to defend these programs in federal court, to be able to say, Your Honor, yes, the state is doing well, but when you look outside of what the state is doing, you see that there are still huge disparities throughout the economy, and that if the state does not take some affirmative action to intervene in the market failure of discrimination, that its results will mirror those of the overall economy. And this was definitely information that the courts looked to in, for example, our successful defense of the Illinois DOT's DBE program some years ago now. So we look at two databases from the census for this. The first is the annual business survey. This used to be called the Survey of Business Owners, and before that it was called the Survey of Minority and Women-Owned Businesses. But it looks at the actual revenues, receipts that go to firms on the basis of race and gender. The Census Bureau's American Community Survey looks at individuals, so entrepreneurs, and we can calculate from that the rates at which minorities and women form firms compared to their similar white male counterparts, as well as compare the earnings from the firms that they do form. We'll also take a look at the extensive government and academic literature on barriers to financial and human capital. There's been some interesting reporting coming out in the wake of the pandemic, and you may have seen a lot of that in the popular press about the ways in which minority-owned firms were disproportionately negatively impacted by the COVID epidemic. And again, this is very important when you're trying to evaluate whether if the state stopped setting goals and went to strictly race neutral measures, things like a small business program or whatever, whether or not it would still be able to achieve parity in its contracting. So that's our quantitative analysis, our statistical analysis, but we also have a qualitative and anecdotal portion of the study where we get feedback and talk to real live people about their experiences. And we're going to do that in a couple of ways. We will be sending out an electronic survey a bit later. So please do get that and fill it out. We have all of your email addresses, so we know how to find you. And we'll also be conducting small group and stakeholder business interviews. We try to divide them between MBEs and non-MWBEs because I have learned, having done this now for 30 years, that if you put everybody in a room together, they'll all sing Kumbaya and tell you how great it all is, but if you separate them out, you're more likely to get honest responses. And you see there some of the topics that we'll particularly focus on. We'll also conduct interviews with the CMS staff and any of the other user departments that can help to shed light on barriers to doing business with the state and to get people's ideas about what might be improved. We'll also be doing a program review of the overall BEP program. We'll obviously take a look at policy and program documents, anything else that the state thinks is useful. We will be in our interviews soliciting suggestions, recommendations for what, if anything, the state could do differently to either manage the program better or to support businesses in their growth and success. And again, there you see some of the topics that we'll touch on. Particularly things like outreach and certification, how are contract goals set, how is the program monitored, what kind of compliance is done, all those kinds of issues that go to how well the program actually functions. This is really the business community's chance to talk to the state through us. Disparity studies are very expensive. They don't get done very often. We did do the last one for the state. It's probably been 6-7 years. So I do hope that people will attend and take this opportunity to share your experiences and tell us what we can do better. We'll also take a look at contract data collection and reporting. How well is that working? And are there things we can do to ease the burden on firms for that as well? Based on all that information, we will make recommendations to the state. I generally divide them into two types. The first are race and gender neutral measures that would help all small firms. The courts require that the state use race neutral measures to the maximum feasible extent. It doesn't mean you have to try them all and have them all fail, but you do have to make a good faith effort to do things like unbundle your contracts, make sure you pay promptly, try to reduce bonding and insurance requirements and experience requirements where possible, those kinds of things. But we'll also give the state our best judgment about whether or not it has sufficient evidence to continue to set narrowly tailored goals on projects, who should be eligible to be in the program. The courts again require that you have to have evidence that every racial and ethnic group and white women that you want to include in your program has in fact suffered discrimination in your marketplace. And then we'll give them some ideas too about managing the program, things like evaluating bids and proposals, how to evaluate good faith effort submissions for firms that don't meet the goal. What about commercially useful function? To make sure that the certified firms are not some type of pass-through in front. And then of course, back to monitoring and contract data collection, something near and dear to our hearts because we're basically a data jockey firm. So here's the schedule. Tentatively, the electronic survey is going to go out in the early fall, I think, at this point. We'll be doing business owner interviews late in the this year and early 2022. You can see there how to get in touch with us. We have a dedicated website. We have a study email. You can also call the study number. And then there's Ms. Johnson's contact information if you'd like to get some more information from the state. So that is it. So let me stop sharing. I can always go back to the presentation if we need to. But perhaps we have some questions. I don't know, Victoria. I see some things in the chat.
One question.
We're asking people to put questions in the Q&A. I'm sorry, please, Vicki, go ahead.
We do have one question from the chat, and it is, are there any significant changes in the methodology compared to what was done in the 215 study?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. Yes, some. We certainly are, I think, doing a more thorough job of contract data collection than we did then. I have a much bigger team now. We have more experience in doing it. So I don't know that I'd call that exactly a change in the methodology, but we certainly are digging very deep. The other thing that we do is we used to do this thing called the 9-90-90 rule, because really what we actually find in practice is that there are a whole bunch of really tiny codes. You know, maybe it's 0.01% of the state spend. And so we used to not analyze them, but over time I changed my mind about that. Because what I saw happening was that when people were trying to set contract goals, even though it might have been such a tiny portion of the spend that makes absolutely no difference to the outcome of the disparity study, but it is still useful to the agency. Because one of the things that we now do that we didn't do before, but it's also because the state didn't have the system, is we do have the ability to essentially provide the data to the state's outside vendor that runs their diversity management system to take the information from the study and load it in to help them set narrowly tailored contract goals. And I did work with the vendor that's B2G now. They also provide the C2 system for the city and pretty much everybody in Illinois. But we wanted to try to figure out a way to use the disparity study data to help the client automate the process of setting contract goals. So that is something that certainly would be new from 2015. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Another question. Will this disparity study model analyze opportunities in the area of professional services like legal, advertising, accounting, consulting, technology services, human resources, and financial services sector?
Yes, we will. And in fact, because these are the contracts managed by Central Management Services, that really is our focus, is professional services, services and goods, because most of the state's construction goes to the Capital Development Board. To the extent that there are contracts that CMS has that are construction, we will obviously include those, but our focus probably for the majority of the spend will be in those areas that you mentioned.
State of Illinois regularly makes exceptions to major procurement areas that are not subject to diversity procurement goals. Huge contracts in healthcare, insurance, and financial services are awarded with zero diverse business participation requirements. Will this study make findings available that suggest ways to move all of this spend into inclusive opportunities?
Well, we're certainly going to include all the industries. I'm not going to prejudge necessarily what the study is going to find. I mean, it's important for people to understand that the research is not designed to give you an outcome. It's designed to take a look at your data and then see what you find. So I'm not going to prejudge that. I can say it can be difficult to set goals on certain types of procurements. And that is an important thing to keep in mind because the courts require that the goals be narrowly tailored. We can't just make them up. We can't put them on contracts where there are no real subcontracting opportunities. But certainly our view is that the right way to think about it is, are there opportunities for other firms to participate, or is this literally a single scope type of project? And if so, what's the availability of ready, willing, and able minority and women-owned firms to participate? So from my perspective, it's not really so much huge exemptions, it's more contract specific. Now, obviously things like purchasing electricity where there's really no market, you can't, I'm able to put goals on that, but otherwise it certainly is something to consider, is going to a true contract by contract goal setting methodology.
How much time will be required to set aside for interviews if we decide to sign up?
That's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Generally, they run about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we're delighted for any amount of time that you can give us. So if that doesn't work for you, please do submit written comments to us. If you sign up for a session and find you can't attend, please just let us know. Or if you have to leave early, that's fine. We know that people are busy, and we are just grateful for whatever time you can give us.
How did the state do in the last disparity study? Were recommendations implemented, and were they successful?
Well, I mean, honestly, when we give our client a study, sometimes they engage us to come back and review and work with them on implementation. That didn't really happen with the state of Illinois. So I'm really not qualified to speak to everything that it might have done and whether or not it was successful. I honestly just personally don't have that knowledge.
Will you please share today's presentation deck?
Yes, we are going to post it on the study website. We will also have this recording, and I believe that the state has their own YouTube channel. That's a big change from the last time. And I think that the thought is to put it there as well. So there'll be plenty of ways to access the information.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm here. I'm just not able to get, I don't, the video is disabled somehow. I was trying to get everything turned on and the video doesn't work. But yes, we, if you are a part of the BEP newsletter list, as well as checking out our new website. Our website was just updated last week. You'll be able to get access to this recording, as well as you can find the links to the Disparity Study website if you don't have it handy.
Okay. Any other questions? Sometimes it's hard to be the after lunch presentation.
Oh, I think one just came in.
Okay, we'll give people a minute to type.
Well, this is a good one. Fantastic job.
Oh, well, there you go. We like that.
And then there's another one. Will you evaluate cases where a bid opportunity is opened under a particular code, such as healthcare, where much of the required work has to do with accounting? In this scenario, a potential subcontractor who is an accounting firm and BEP certified under accounting codes cannot be considered.
Well, we're not planning to look at, bid by bid. That's for sure. We'd never get done. There's way too many for that. I'm not quite sure what you mean was not considered. Again, I think certainly it's clear that the way to do correct contract goal setting is to look at all the potential scopes. And I don't doubt what you're saying, that in this particular solicitation, while it might have overall been called healthcare, that there may be some accounting that's necessary to perform the contract. So that would certainly always be our suggestions to clients, is not to come with a whole bunch of preconceived ideas about it, but to actually look at the scopes. But I would certainly love for you to come to the interviews. It sounds like this was a situation with which the questioner has some personal knowledge. And so it would be great if you could come and share that, or submit some written comments to us as well. We'd love to hear more about that.
Somebody is asking whether or not there are incentives associated with participation.
Well, I'm not quite sure what's meant by incentives. That covers potentially a lot of territory. The courts do not permit people to get bonuses for MWBE participation, or to favor more or higher participation over less. The operative legal principle is that a firm that makes a good faith effort to meet a goal has to be treated the same as one that made the goal. So if by incentives you mean extra points or something like that, that is certainly legally problematic. Now, we do see incentive programs, for example, that work to size or something like that, and that those are all race neutral. And that's an important point to just keep in mind, is that the framework really is race conscious remedies, which is essentially contract goals, and then race neutral approaches, which are things that would help all small firms, regardless of whether or not they were a woman or minority owned. And so if you're in the race neutral bucket, you have a lot of flexibility. Bonuses on the basis of size, or probably location, that has some potential other constitutional issues, but they're not 14th Amendment equal protection problems. A lot of flexibility about that, but once it comes to recognizing race or gender and making some type of preference on that basis, then the courts really do require that be the least burdensome possible. That has to be flexible. It can't be a quota. It can't be a set aside. So, it sort of depends, I guess, what you mean by incentives.
Secondary commodity codes are very necessary in order to move BEP forward, as there are opportunities for professional services on almost all contracts. And that's just a comment that was posted.
Okay.
And that is it in terms of questions.
Okay. Well, I see lots of things in the comments, and people maybe put questions into the chat. Well, I do see one here, and Victoria, I mean, I'm going to start kind of at the bottom, so you might want to scroll through the chat because it looks like people did maybe put questions in there. One is, are there incentives such as a payment for participating in the study? The short answer to that is no. I'm very deeply concerned that judges would be skeptical of information that we paid people for. So no, we impose upon your civic mindedness and your desire to be supportive of the overall effort. As I mentioned before, we're probably talking about maybe 2 hours of your time. So it shouldn't be too much, but we aren't really able to pay people to participate.
Someone is also asking if we could share the YouTube channel where the link will be posted.
Yes, I am pasting it in now.
Wonderful, thank you. That looks like when will you provide a complete list of all contract categories? Well, that'll be in the final study report. We will have, there are lots of tables. I was looking at a study we did for the Washington State Department of Transportation a couple years ago last night about something. And I think we had 72 tables in that chapter. So we have tables, and they will certainly be in the report, and it will list all of the 6-digit NAICS codes that we use to analyze for the study. Let's see, anything else? Copies of the presentations. Okay, someone asked a question. I really think this is should be directed to CMS, not at this meeting, but perhaps afterwards, is to get in touch with Ariel's staff. Someone says, we're having issues with finding contracts or how to find for security training and or security contracting. So I can't help you there. But I do suggest that you get in touch with the BEP staff, and perhaps they might be able to give you some assistance on that.
Yes, please sign up for our newsletter on the website that I shared in the chat. There's also a buying guide that shows out for the intentions on upcoming opportunities over the next 18 months. So please check out our newsletter because we send out information about that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and let me just echo this. I mean, and this isn't directly a study comment, but as I said, I've been working on these programs for over 30 years. I've interviewed probably a couple of thousand firms by now. And the ability to have a forecast is really important. So I want to commend the state for doing that, because it does allow small firms to plan, as well as to seek out relationships with larger firms that you might want to partner with or be subcontractors to before the bids hit the street. Because by that time, it can be very late in the game to be putting a team together and finding out what opportunities are there. My recollection is even in the past, BEP did a lot of outreach events, and presumably, with the improvements in technology over the last 7 years or whatever, that certainly has continued. So I really do urge folks to take advantage of that, because if you are more proactive, you're just likely to be more successful. I get this comment often in the interviews. Well, I'm certified, nobody calls me. Well, did you call anybody else? What did you do? It's a big list, and people will default to the people that they already know and that they've heard from. So that contracting forecast is really important, as well as getting the newsletter, participating in the events, getting to know the BEP people. There's really kind of no shortcut for it. I know it's time consuming, but I don't have really a way to save people from doing that work.
There are a couple more questions that
Okay.
came in.
All right, good.
What would be the best way to express prime vendor experiences which result in state agencies or a state agency suing the small business vendor for minor contract violations, which result in the vendor going out of business?
Well, I might need to hear that question again. It sounds like this is an set of experiences that would be good to come to the interviews and share with us in a little bit more detail. You know, I've been a practicing lawyer for over 35 years now, and there's all sorts of reasons people get sued. So I don't think I can really address that at all in the abstract, but it would be good maybe to come to the interview and then we could talk about it a little bit more.
Will you look at the value of the state working with city and county agencies to better streamline the MWBE business certification process?
Well, we'll certainly take a look at certification. Like I say, you know, I've been at this a really long time, and it can be difficult to get agencies sometimes to work together. You know, in some ways, all we can do is make recommendations about that. My understanding, and Ariel, you know, please jump in here, and especially if I misspeak, is that the state has been working to streamline the certification process and have more reciprocal abilities with, I'm assuming we're talking about the city and the county, because those are really the only other two games in the state. But maybe there's more information that we could share with the group.
Yes, we recently had our fast track process that was implemented towards the end of last year and has significantly grown our vendor pool as a result. And then also there has been recent legislation in regards to even more reciprocity and opportunities to be able to more easily become certified. And once I don't want to misspeak. I'm not sure if this legislation has been signed into law, but it was passed. And so there may be some other implications on that process as well. But we have been doing a lot in regards to our fast track processes as well. And on that new website, on the link that I shared, it explains the fast track process. And there should be more information coming out as well as that program grows.
Okay.
When you evaluate utilization, do you only consider actual spend with BEP subcontractors? And how difficult is it to obtain that data from prime contractors?
Well, we take a look at spend with all contractors. So that's why we have to go back to primes to confirm not just the spend with BEP firms, but with all of their subs. You know, in terms of how difficult it is, you know, it can be challenging. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. I actually kind of surprised it in some ways at how cooperative people really are. They mostly will give you what you ask for. We have an entire team of people, and that's all they do is chase contract data. So they've gotten very good at it. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's a rare government contract that doesn't have some type of audit clause. And so as agents of the state, we can ask for information. And people really do give it to us, usually without too much of a fuss. You know, one thing that has become more of a challenge over time is simply the whole phishing issue, scamming. And so sometimes, and I totally understand why, a firm will want to contact Ariel's office or somebody at the state just to make sure that we aren't, you know, somebody, you know, trying to find their long lost grandmother and give them their inheritance kind of thing. So I can appreciate that. So that has become a bit more of a challenge over time, but it's one that we can adapt to, and we ask our agency client, if necessary, you know, can you respond to this person and tell them that, yes, we really are legitimate researchers. We will keep your information confidential, and we are not here to try to sell you something or scam you.
How many years of operation should a business have in order to participate?
Oh, well, whatever minimum number you have. I mean, to the extent that if you have been long established and you've done work for the state or tried to, that's always good to hear. But I know that the state is also interested in what it can do to assist new firms and to help new firms to penetrate state contracts. So we'd like to hear from you as well.
That's all the questions that I have in both the chat and in the Q&A.
Okay. Well, we'll give people just another minute to type on in there if they've got anything else. And you can always certainly contact us through the study site or through the email or call us. You can even come to me directly, but I will be honest and say I get about 200 emails a day. So you'll get a faster response if you go to the study email, because Victoria monitors that all the time. But we'd certainly be happy to answer any questions that you have or address any concerns and provide you with any additional information that we can. So if that's it, we thank you very much for your time. Again, the recording and everything will be posted in various places. Vicki, why don't we leave up the chat for just a minute or two to give people time to find and copy those links if they're so inclined. But again, you can also email us if you can't find what you're looking for. So
we did have one more come in.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good.
The state and other procurement entities are missing opportunities to help primes and BEP certified subcontractors connect. What's happening now is that the state might list relevant NACE codes or provide a list of BEP companies, but it's very hard for primes and subs to connect. Glad to share more.
I'm sorry, to what? Share more?
Share more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it sounds more like a comment.
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent that anyone has suggestions about how to make that easier, we'd certainly like to hear it. But perhaps more on the construction side, but you do see some of the large firms, they'll hold their own pre-bid outreach meetings. Certainly, we always suggest that folks attend the pre-proposal or pre-bid meeting if they can, or at the very least, be able to access who's picked up the plans, who signed in, so they might be interested, and then reach out to those other firms as a way to make those connections. But if folks have additional ideas about how to do that, we would certainly love to hear them. All right, well, if no one else has any questions, again, thank you very much for your time. We hope that you'll participate in the survey if you're a business owner, and in the small group interviews. You can go back to the website for updates. As I said, the process of doing a full dress state disparity study takes about a year. So I would be looking for us to be coming back probably around 12 months from now with the final report. And I think the plan, which I guess could change, but I think the plan is for us to do the same type of informational presentation of the results of the disparity study to be able to share them with the community. So thank you to everyone, and have a good rest of your afternoon.